I was standing at the edge of Mirror Lake watching the morning mist curl off the water like smoke, when I heard someone call out a name I hadn't used in 15 years. Not my real name, but the nickname the guys in my unit gave me back in Korea. My breath caught in my throat as I turned around, and there he was. Reed. Staff Sergeant Reed Morrison. Though back then he was just Corporal Morrison, and I was Private Logan Hayes, fresh out of basic training and terrified of everything except admitting I was terrified. He was standing 30 feet away, a fishing rod in one hand, and even from that distance I could see the recognition dawning on his face, the same way it must have been dawning on mine. 15 years. 15 years since we'd shared that cramped two-man tent on the outskirts of Camp Casey, since we'd pulled guard duty together in the freezing Korean winter, since the night everything changed between us, and then we'd both pretended it never happened at all. My heart was hammering so hard I thought he might hear it across the distance. He looked different, of course. We both did. The military haircut had grown out into something softer, touched with grey at the temples. He'd filled out a little, looked more settled somehow, less like the wound-tight soldier I remembered. But his eyes were the same, dark brown, almost black in certain lights, the kind of eyes that always seemed to see more than you wanted them to. I should have said something. Should have waved, smiled, acted like running into an old army buddy was the most normal thing in the world. Instead, I just stood there like an idiot, my fishing gear forgotten at my feet, while my mind raced back to Korea, to the tent, to the night I'd spent the last 15 years trying not to think about. Reed moved first. He set his fishing rod against a tree and walked toward me, and with each step he took, I felt time collapsing in on itself. Suddenly I was 22 again, lying awake in my sleeping bag, listening to Reed breathe in the darkness 3 feet away from me, wondering if he could hear how fast my heart was beating, wondering what the hell was wrong with me that I couldn't stop noticing the way his shoulders moved when he took off his jacket, or the sound of his laugh, or the fact that when he looked at me sometimes, I felt like I was standing too close to a fire. He stopped a few feet away, and for a long moment we just looked at each other. Then he smiled, and it was like 15 years hadn't passed at all. "Hayes," he said, and his voice was deeper than I remembered, but still familiar in a way that made my chest ache. "I thought that was you." "What are the odds?" "Morrison," I managed to say, and I was grateful my voice came out steady. "Yeah, small world." We shook hands, which felt absurdly formal given that we'd spent 9 months living in each other's pockets, but what else were we supposed to do? Hug? That felt like it would be crossing some invisible line we'd drawn a long time ago. His hand was warm and calloused, and I let go maybe a second too quickly. "You fish here often?" he asked, and I could hear him trying to find his footing in this conversation, same as me. "First time," I said. "I moved to Pinewood about 6 months ago. Heard the lake was good for trout. You?" "I'm local," he said. "Well, local-ish. Been here about 3 years now. I'm out here most weekends." He paused, and something shifted in his expression, became a little more uncertain. "Look, this is weird, right? Running into each other like this?" "So weird," I agreed, and felt some of the tension ease just from acknowledging it. He laughed, and the sound brought back a rush of memories. Long nights on guard duty, talking about nothing and everything. The way he'd made me laugh during the worst homesickness I'd ever felt. The easy friendship we'd built right up until it stopped being easy at all. "You want to grab some coffee or something?" he asked. "There's a diner about 10 minutes from here. We could catch up. I mean, if you want, if you're not busy." I should have said I was busy. Should have made some excuse, kept my distance, protected the careful life I'd built for myself since leaving the army. But I looked at him standing there in his flannel shirt and worn jeans, looking nervous in a way I'd never seen him look back when he was the confident NCO everyone respected, and I heard myself say, "Yeah, coffee sounds good." The diner was one of those classic small-town places with red vinyl booths and a laminated menu that hadn't changed since the 80s. We ordered coffee and sat across from each other, and for the first few minutes we did the standard catching-up thing. He told me he'd gotten out of the army after 12 years, worked construction for a while, now managed a hardware store in town. I told him about my job in IT, the consulting work that let me work remotely, which was why I'd been able to move to a nowhere town like Pinewood in the first place. It was all surface-level stuff, the kind of conversation you have with anyone you haven't seen in a long time. But underneath it, I could feel the weight of everything we weren't saying. The tent. The night it had been so cold that our breath froze in the air. The way we'd huddled together for warmth, because that's what you did. That's what soldiers did. It didn't mean anything except survival. except at some point, lying there in the darkness with Reed's arm around me and mine around him, I'd realised I didn't want to move away, and I'd felt him shift slightly, his hand tightening on my shoulder, and when I'd turned my head, our faces had been inches apart. I'd been the one to close the distance. I'd kissed him, there in that freezing tent in Korea, and for about 5 perfect seconds he'd kissed me back. Then he'd pulled away, and we'd both lain there in the darkness, not speaking, barely breathing, until eventually we'd fallen asleep from sheer exhaustion. The next morning neither of us had mentioned it. We'd never mentioned it. We'd finished out our deployment being professionally cordial to each other, and when my tour ended and I rotated back to the States, we'd shaken hands and said good luck, and that had been that. So, Reed said, pulling me out of my thoughts. He was turning his coffee cup in circles on the table, not quite meeting my eyes. You ever think about Korea? My pulse kicked up. Sometimes, I said carefully. Yeah, me too. He was quiet for a moment, still focused on his coffee cup. Look, Hayes, Logan. Can I call you Logan? That's my name, I said, trying for lightness. Logan? He finally looked up at me and the expression in his eyes made my breath catch. I've thought about that night a lot. The tent. I've thought about it for 15 years. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Reed? Let me say this, he interrupted. I need to say this because if I don't say it now, I'm never going to get another chance. He took a deep breath. I didn't pull away that night because I didn't want to kiss you. I pulled away because I was terrified. Terrified of what it meant. Terrified of what would happen if anyone found out. Terrified of how much I wanted to keep kissing you. Don't ask. Don't tell was still in effect back then, and I was an NCO, and you were enlisted, and there were about 1,000 reasons why I told myself it could never happen. But none of those reasons changed the fact that I wanted it to happen. That I wanted you. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at him while my entire understanding of the past 15 years rearranged itself. You wanted me, I repeated like I needed to hear the words again to believe them. I wanted you, he confirmed. Want, wanted, present, and past tense. I know it's been 15 years. I know you probably moved on, probably have a whole life I don't know anything about. But when I saw you standing by the lake this morning, it felt like fate or destiny or whatever you want to call it. Like I was getting a second chance at something I thought I'd lost forever, and I couldn't let you walk away again without telling you the truth. My hands were shaking. I put them in my lap so he wouldn't see. I thought I'd imagined it, I said quietly, the way you kissed me back. I thought maybe I'd made it up because I wanted it so badly. And when you pulled away, when we never talked about it, I figured I'd made a mistake. That you were just being kind, or that you'd done it out of instinct and then realised what you were doing and regretted it. I never regretted it, Reed said. His voice was rough. Not once. I regretted pulling away. I regretted not being braver. I regretted letting you leave without telling you how I felt. But I never regretted kissing you. The waitress came by to refill our coffee, and we both sat back, waiting in tense silence until she left. When she was gone, I leaned forward again, keeping my voice low even though the diner was mostly empty. I moved to Pinewood to start over, I told him. After I left the army, I tried to be the person everyone expected me to be. I dated women, went through the motions, told myself that what I'd felt for you was just confusion or loneliness or some phase I'd grown out of. But it wasn't. I couldn't grow out of it because it wasn't a phase. It was who I was, who I am. And I finally got tired of pretending otherwise. So I moved somewhere no one knew me, somewhere I could just be myself without all the weight of expectation. I've been out for 3 years now. To myself, anyway. It's not like there's much of a gay scene in Pinewood to be out to, Reed's expression softened. That took courage, he said. More courage than I've had. I haven't told anyone, haven't even really admitted it to myself until recently. I got married after I left the army. It lasted 4 years. She was a good person, and I cared about her, but it wasn't fair to her. She deserved someone who could love her the way she needed to be loved, and I couldn't be that person. We divorced 2 years ago, and I told myself it was because we wanted different things, because the timing was wrong, because of a dozen other reasons that weren't the real reason. What was the real reason, I asked, even though I thought I knew. The real reason was that every time I was with her, I was thinking about someone else. About a tent in Korea and a kiss that lasted 5 seconds and changed my entire life. About you. He reached across the table, hesitated, then laid his hand palm up between us. An offering. An invitation. I don't know what happens next, Logan. I don't know if you're seeing anyone or if you'd even want to give this a shot after all this time. But I know I don't want to spend the next 15 years wondering what if. So I'm asking, is there a chance? For us? I looked at his hand, at the calluses and scars and the slight tremor that showed me he was just as nervous as I was. 15 years ago, I'd been too young and too scared to understand what I was feeling. I'd kissed him on impulse and then spent years wondering if I'd ruined everything. But I wasn't that frightened kid anymore. I'd done the hard work of figuring out who I was, of accepting myself, of building a life that was authentic even if it was lonely sometimes. And now here was Reed, offering me something I'd thought was lost forever. I reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around mine, warm and solid and real. I'm not seeing anyone, I said, and yeah, there's a chance. There's definitely a chance. The smile that spread across his face was worth every moment of uncertainty, every year of wondering and waiting. Yeah, he said, and he sounded almost disbelieving, like he'd prepared himself for rejection and didn't quite know how to handle acceptance. Yeah, I confirmed, but we're doing this right. No more running away, no more pretending. If we're going to try this, we're going to actually try. That means being honest with each other, even when it's scary, especially when it's scary. I can do that, Reed said. He was still holding my hand, his thumb brushing across my knuckles in a gesture that was both tentative and tender. I want to do that. I'm so tired of being scared, Logan. I'm tired of hiding. We talked for another 2 hours until the lunch rush started and the diner got too crowded for the kind of conversation we were having. We exchanged phone numbers, made plans to have dinner that weekend, agreed to take things slow and see where they went. When we finally left the diner and walked back to the lake to collect our abandoned fishing gear, Reed caught my hand again, threading his fingers through mine as we walked. It was such a simple gesture, holding hands in broad daylight, but it felt revolutionary. I'd spent so many years keeping that part of myself hidden, being careful about who I touched and how and where. But here was Reed, holding my hand where anyone could see, and the only thing I felt was relief. Relief and happiness and the tentative beginning of hope. You know what's funny, Reed said as we reached my car. I almost didn't come fishing this morning. I was tired, thought about sleeping in, but something told me to get up to come to the lake, and then there you were. Fate or destiny or whatever you want to call it, I said, echoing his words from earlier. Yeah. He turned to face me, still holding my hand. Can I kiss you? I've been wanting to kiss you since the moment I recognized you, and I don't want to wait another 15 years. I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to change my mind. But I didn't want to change my mind. I wanted this. Wanted him. When his lips met mine, it was nothing like that desperate kiss in the tent all those years ago. This was softer, sweeter, a promise instead of a question. He cupped my face with his free hand, and I felt 15 years of longing and regret and what-ifs dissolve into this single perfect moment. When we finally pulled apart, we were both smiling like idiots. Dinner this weekend, Reed said, but also can I call you? Like tonight? I don't want to wait until the weekend to talk to you again. You can call me whenever you want, I said. I'll answer. He kissed me again, quick and almost giddy, then stepped back. I should let you go. But Logan, thank you for giving me a second chance. For being brave enough to kiss me first, all those years ago. For being here today. Thank you for recognizing me, I said. For calling out. For being brave enough to tell me the truth. I drove home in a daze, my lips still tingling, my hand still warm from holding his. When I got back to my apartment, I stood at the window looking out at the mountains and thought about chance and timing and the strange ways life brings people back together. I'd come to Pinewood looking for peace, for a place where I could be myself without judgment or expectation. I hadn't been looking for love, hadn't even been sure I believed in it anymore after so many years of feeling broken and wrong and alone. But love had found me anyway, in the form of a fisherman at a lake who'd recognized me across time and distance and 15 years of silence. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Reed. Made it home. Still can't believe today was real. Can't wait to see you again. I smiled and typed back. It was real. It is real. Call me tonight. And he did call, and we talked until past midnight, sharing stories and memories and dreams for the future. We had dinner that weekend, and the weekend after that, and slowly, carefully, we built something neither of us had thought we'd ever get to have. It wasn't always easy. We both had scars and fears and learned behaviours that took time to unlearn. But we were patient with each other, honest with each other, committed to doing the work required to make it last. 6 months after that morning at the lake, Reed asked me to move in with him. A year after that, we drove back to Korea together, visiting the base where we'd met, standing together at the spot where our tent had been. We held hands in the cold Korean winter and talked about the scared young men we'd been, and how far we'd come, and how grateful we were for second chances. Sometimes I still can't quite believe it. That the fisherman at the lake recognised me. That he had the courage to tell me the truth. That we got to rewrite our ending after all these years. But then Reed will catch my eye across the room, or reach for my hand, or kiss me goodnight, and I remember that some stories don't end the first time. Some stories just take a while to find their way back to the beginning, to the moment when everything changed so they can start again and get it right this time.